The Great Western Railway celebrated its 150th birthday with a cavalcade of over 40 mainline steam specials throughout the summer and autumn of 1985. This is a Newport to Hereford train, double-headed with Clun Castle and Hagley Hall. Clun Castle is maintained at Drysllwyn, home of the Birmingham Railway Museum, where it has been kept since it was withdrawn from service in 1966. Built in 1950 at Swindon Works to the same basic design as the first castles in 1923, Clun Castle has now spent more years in preservation than in line service. At Stratford-on-Avon in June 1985, she was to turn the clock back 30 years, taking the Shakespeare Express over the North Warwickshire line to Birmingham. Once the Great Western trunk line from the Midlands to the west, the route has been abandoned south of Stratford and is now threatened with complete closure. Clun Castle's presence brought back the mainline atmosphere, and a footplate trip to Birmingham at express speeds vividly recalled the excitement of the days of steam. At the typical Great Western station at Henley in Arden, the train pauses to enable us to admire the chocolate and cream livery of the newly restored Great Western coaches. The 12-wheeled Royal Saloon, pride of the Birmingham Railway Museum, dates from 1940, while the inspection coach was built in the 30s. Clun Castle also took part in a successful series of summer tours from Gloucester to Swindon, here seen at Frampton Mansell on the climb to the summit of the line at Sapperton. Guests attending British Rail's Newport Freight Spectacular in September were brought to the scene by steam special, hauled by Clun Castle. Pullman luxury contrasted sharply with the workaday outline of a steam freight engine. (2857) was a Churchwood engine, built at Swindon in 1918 and hauled heavy freight on the GWR until withdrawal in the 60s. It was rescued from Barry's scrapyard in 1975 and taken to the Severn Valley Railway. The discovery of damage to the superheater flue and cracks in one of the cylinder blocks led to delays in the restoration work, which took 5 years to complete. It all seemed worth it, as the first scheduled steam freight for 20 years left Alexandra Dockyard for Newport, recalling the once familiar sight of steam in the service of industry. After staging a run past at Newport, the 280 bustled across Newport Bridge with its vintage goods train on its way home to the Severn Valley Railway. Another rare steam working took place earlier in the summer when 262 tank number 7752 returned to Didcot after appearing at Reading Depot Open Day. The special freight of preserved stock included the broad-gauge replica Iron Duke, en route for display in Birmingham via Didcot. Although covered in tarpaulins and minus its chimney, the unmistakable outline of the Gooch 422 travelling on Brunel's original broad-gauge main line was certainly one of the unsung highlights of the Great Western 150th year. Great Western steam also attracted royal interest when the Duke of Gloucester visited Birmingham Railway Museum on June the 5th. After inspecting the broad-gauge replica, the Duke went to Birmingham Moor Street station to visit the GW150 exhibition train. Here, splendidly turned out, was Clun Castle, waiting to take him in the newly restored Royal Saloon on a trip to Tyseley. To mark the occasion, a special Royal Train lamp was carried on the front of the engine. The Duke, however, much preferred the locomotive to the saloon, and in his enthusiasm at the prospect of a footplate trip on the main line, almost forgot to thank the Deputy Manager of the London Midland region, his host for the occasion. With the courtesies completed, the Duke was off, and Clun Castle left Moor Street for Tyseley with more people on the footplate than the regulations normally allow, but nobody was counting on this occasion. Further west now, at Bristol, memories of steam on shed were brought back as number 5051 Drysllwyn Castle and 4930 Hagley Hall were prepared to work a double-headed special to Plymouth on June the 8th. The hall was supplied by the Severn Valley Railway, while the Castle loco, an original Great Western example built in 1936, was provided by the Great Western Society at Didcot. Bath Road Depot's diesels played host to 3 mainline steam locos, as Clun Castle was also on shed as standby engine. Steam locos were taking over a special from Paddington, brought into Temple Mead Station by a Class 47 diesel Isambard Kingdom Brunel, specially named for the GW150 celebrations and turned out in GW-style livery and number plates. Steam then took over for the 128-mile run to Plymouth. At Bridgewater, crowds who had turned out for the anniversary celebrations of the Civil War Battle of Sedgemoor seemed just as content to watch a steam train go by. After climbing the Somerset Hills towards Whiteball Summit, the train passed along the well-known stretch at Dawlish, where the Great Western promoted its famous Holidays in the West. At this point in the trip, the locomotives were steaming badly, owing to a supply of inferior coal at Bristol, and the train stalled shortly after leaving Newton Abbot. So the Devon Hills, which should have resounded to a steam express in full cry, remained silent. It was decided for the rest of the steam programme to operate the Devon trains from the Plymouth end, on the basis that the hardest work would then be at the start of the run with freshly prepared engines. So, for the September the 1st trip, originally advertised to start at Bristol, the two designated locos, Clun Castle and Drysllwyn Castle, ran light all the way from Bristol to Plymouth to pick up their train. Here the light engines with their Great Western support coach are seen passing Teignmouth Bay. The engines were briefly serviced at Plymouth Lara Depot, while superpower in the form of a diesel Class 50 was provided for the crew support coach to attach it to the train waiting at North Road Station. Just after leaving Plympton, the two castles attacked the foot of Hemerdon Bank in fine style. Devon banks now echoed properly to the sounds of steam. For the general public, the stops en route made popular Sunday viewing. Thornton, one of the last mainline stations with traditional semaphore signalling, made a perfect setting for a steam departure. One of the most interesting steam trips of Great Western 150 was a run from Truro to Plymouth on Friday, September the 6th. The locomotive earmarked was, naturally enough, the one-time rail speed record holder, City of Truro. But restoration of the loco had been held up, and it wasn't sent out on a test run until September the 3rd, by which time the Truro run had been allocated to another locomotive. Shrub Hill Station at Worcester, another one with its original semaphore signals still intact, provided some genuine Great Western atmosphere for this historic locomotive. The engine was en route back to Kidderminster, to its temporary home on the Severn Valley Railway. So, for the rest of the summer, City of Truro had to exchange the glamour of the main line for the rustic charms of the country branch, as the Severn Valley Railway, who had restored the engine, showed it off to the public for the first time in 24 years. The ever-popular September Enthusiast Weekend on the Severn Valley Railway also gave Great Western fans another chance to see the 280 freight engine at work. A regular Severn Valley loco is Hinton Manor, restored in early British Railways black. On a special visit from Birmingham, 7029 Clun Castle again. Finally, an unusual pairing as two one-time record holders on the Plymouth run, City of Truro and Clun Castle, leave Kidderminster together, back to back. The trip to Cornwall was placed in the capable hands of Clun Castle, which by now had proved to be one of the most reliable performers of the season's steam events. Bernard Rainbow made the final checks before 7029 set out from Plymouth with the empty stock for the special. The trip was to take steam back onto the Cornish main line for the first time in 21 years, over the famous Royal Albert Bridge across the Tamar at Saltash, built by Brunel in 1859. This is the most impressive of Brunel's original structures still in service, and forms a lasting memorial to the great engineer. Other Brunel viaducts, such as this one near Liscard, have since been replaced by more modern ones, while the original stone piers with their flying buttresses stand alongside, ruined cathedrals from the first age of steam. Holiday crowds besieged the small engine shed at St Blaise as Clun Castle squeezed onto the turntable. The engine was being serviced here for its trip from Truro to Plymouth, and the little half-roundhouse was quite overwhelmed by its distinguished visitor. Even in steam days, the shed was hardly ever visited by a castle. Tank engines on China clay trains were more the style. A hose in the back of the roundhouse provided a water supply, since the water columns from steam days had long since been removed. Once serviced, the castle set out to pick up its train for a unique event, the return of steam to the Cornish main line. A one-off tour not to be repeated. Brunswick green engine streaking through the Cornish countryside with a rake of chocolate and cream carriages seemed too good to be true, but it was there for all to see, and in perfect sun too, just like the Great Western holiday brochures. Now, an engine driver's view of a classic railway scene, the approach to the Royal Albert Bridge at Saltash. Brunel's great structure now carries a severe speed restriction, but nothing can detract from the magnificent views of the Tamar to be had from the train, nor were the people of Plymouth put off from turning out by the score to see steam at Saltash for the first time in over 20 years. After its successful trip to Cornwall, Clun Castle joined forces with Drysllwyn Castle again for the September the 8th run from Plymouth back to Bristol. Hemerdon Bank was climbed in misty weather, but Dawlish Warren proved a perfect vantage point for one of the last trips with steam in the west. For many enthusiasts, the most exciting event of GW150 was kept to the very last, the return to the main line of City of Truro. The restoration of this veteran was carried out by volunteers of the Severn Valley Railway free of all labour charges, involving the renewal of 700 firebox stays, a full retube of the boiler and much other heavy work. Just painting the engine took 3 weeks. Witnessed the meticulous attention to detail in the elegant panel style of the tender, with its Edwardian period scroll crest. Designed by Churchwood and built at Swindon in 1903, this was one of the last of the flyers, that Victorian breed of small but very fast locos designed for short trains in the days when speed was only associated with first-class passengers and ocean mails. It was near Wellington in 1904 that City of Truro reached a speed of 102 miles an hour while hauling the Plymouth Mail, a world rail speed record, still held by the engine on its retirement in 1931. Our selection of the events of GW150 ends with City of Truro's triumphant, if somewhat sedate, return to the main line, Gloucester to Newport, October the 20th, 1985. Railway lovers, 1985 will be remembered as the year of the Great Western, when the railway celebrated its 150th birthday with a unique programme of events, including steam tours on lines where no steam locomotives had been seen for well over 20 years. This is the first of the 1985 tours, in February, when the ex-GWR locomotive Hagley Hall ran from Newport to Swindon via Gloucester, crossing the Wye Gorge at Chepstow. Just as a precaution, a backup diesel followed the train at a discreet distance. Sightseers from miles around jammed the old station at Stroud. "35 years after nationalisation, the station buildings still bear their GWR initials with pride. The preserved Great Central Railway in Leicestershire has made a significant contribution to the GW150 celebrations by bringing back to the rails the only working example of the 8-couple tank engines that once were such a familiar sight in the Welsh valleys. Bluebell Railway in Sussex operates the splendidly Edwardian Duke Dog Class 440 Earl of Berkeley that once ran in central Wales on the old Cambrian section. The one event that has captured the imagination more than any other has been the return of steam to Devon. The Great Western is remembered with affection as the railway one took for the summer holidays, to the beaches at Paignton and Torquay, the cliffs at Dawlish and the fishing villages of Cornwall. On Easter Day 1985, Brunel's splendid station at Bristol Temple Meads echoed once more to the hiss of steam as preparations began for the departure of the Great Western Limited to Plymouth. Number 6000, King George V, was the pride of the line, built in 1927 and sent the same year as an exhibition locomotive to Baltimore, USA, where it acquired its presentation bell, mounted on the buffer beam. (7819) Hinton Manor was built at Swindon in 1939 and was in service until 1965, when she was sold for scrap. But she escaped the torch, being bought privately and sent to the Severn Valley Railway for preservation in 1973. Hinton Manor has been finished in early British Railways livery, as the early years of nationalisation represent the locomotive's heyday, when it emerged from the wartime drab of the 40s to see in the 50s in glossy black, fully lined out, and the name and number plates picked out in red. In the 60s, it even had the honour of hauling the Royal Train on one occasion, and was regular engine for the Cambrian Coast Express from Shrewsbury to Aberystwyth. King George V, the most famous locomotive on the Great Western, is a heavy express locomotive returning to its old beat, the main line to the west, where it used to haul the Cornish Riviera Express. The special is now ready, and the first steam train west of Bristol for 20 years is on its way. Alas, despite all the planning and care that went into running the special, King George V was stopped at Taunton with an overheated axle, and the special had to go on its way with just Hinton Manor at the head. A Manor could not, of course, manage the heavy 13-coach train on its own up the climb to Wellington, and a pair of diesels gave a helpful shove at the rear. Heavy rain made things seem even worse, but all was not lost. The Severn Valley Railway at Bridgnorth stepped into the breach by preparing Hagley Hall as replacement loco in record time. It is quite an achievement by Preserve Railway to have a spare loco handy with a mainline certificate when it already has one out on the line. What's more, the choice was historically perfect, as Hagley spent most of its life in the West. At Plymouth the next morning, the crowds that turned out would have done justice to a royal visit. But it was the steam locomotive they came to see, and they were not disappointed. It must have been a proud moment for the Severn Valley Railway to see two of their locomotives doing the honours on such a momentous occasion, as the Great Western Limited set out for the return run to Bristol on Easter Monday. After leaving Plymouth, the line climbs high above the Devon valleys before coming down to sea level again and the best-known stretch of the old Great Western along the sea wall at Dawlish. Here it was that generations of holidaymakers arrived by GWR year after year, when a visit to the seaside was not complete without a daily procession of kings, manors, halls and castles steaming along the shore on the Royal Road to the west. It was in London's Kensington Gardens that the Science Museum publicly paid tribute to Eisenbach Kingdom Brunel's original concept of the broad gauge. The Iron Duke is a full-size working replica of a broad gauge Express 422 locomotive, as designed by the GWR's first locomotive superintendent, Daniel Gooch. The Science Museum commissioned the locomotive from Resco Railways, most ingeniously using the boiler and mechanical parts from a wartime austerity shunting engine, kindly donated by the National Coal Board. The last broad gauge train ran in 1892, and sadly none has survived. Only now can the full majesty of Brunel's vision be appreciated. Before the official inauguration of the Iron Duke, a test run was made on the specially laid 7-foot track by the Albert Memorial. Guests for the naming ceremony arrived in suitable style by horse-drawn bus. The Duke of Wellington then unveiled the nameplate commemorating his ancestor. He climbed aboard the footplate to realise a long-cherished ambition to drive a steam locomotive, assisted by Tony Hall Patch of the Science Museum, in charge of the broad gauge project. After topping up the fire, the Duke was soon underway. He seemed determined to show off to the crowds and the cameras his prowess with the whistle. bringing up the rear a replica third-class six-wheeler built by the Western Region apprentices at Cardiff. After the inaugural trip, the regulator was taken over by Mike Hart, director of Resco Railways, who constructed the locomotive at their Maidstone works. The GWR in 1842 ran the first ever royal train, conveying Queen Victoria to Windsor. She afterwards said she was quite charmed by it, though it must be said her coach was more comfortable than this one. The Iron Duke steams majestically past the Royal Albert Hall, where, in a frieze devoted to the progress of mankind, there is depicted a Gooch broad gauge 422, showing how highly regarded the Great Western Railway was in Brunel's heyday. The Iron Duke pulls up at the end of the demonstration track at the site of the entrance to the Great Exhibition of 1851. The original iron gates are still there, ignored nowadays by passers-by unaware of their purpose. Here, visiting heads of state and royalty would pass on their way to witness the achievements of the British Empire and people in the vast Crystal Palace. It was made entirely of iron and glass and had been erected in Hyde Park specially for the exhibition. In the Hall of Industry, taking pride of place, was another Gooch 422, the Lord of the Isles, displaying the showpiece of the Great Western Railway to an incredulous world. 34 years later, Gooch's Leviathan still drew the crowds. A tribute to the romantic vision of the greatest 19th century engineer, Eisenbar Kingdom Brunel.